We're at the point now where we can start creating our stories. So taking a look at our home page here, you'll see that all of these stories here are all hard-coded. Now let's make this more dynamic, and actually we should have a button at the top here to create a new story. Before we do anything else, let's go into our app assets style sheets and create a new file. And we're going to call this style.scss. And in here we should have body padding top. Let's just say 60 pixels for now. Do refresh, and there you have it. It just pushed everything down, and here is the button that should have been there to begin with. Let's make this button dynamic and functional, so when you actually click on it, it'll take you to a separate page with a form for you to be able to create a scary story. Going into our routes RB file, before I type anything in here, let's do a rake routes in the terminal just to show you what our routes look like right now. And you'll see that all we have in here is devise and our root path of stories that points to our index action on our stories controller. Now back into our routes RB file, put in here resources, stories. Save it, run these rake routes again. Misspelling. Just spell it right. Rake routes. And here you have that it's created all of our CRUD actions for us. So this one line of code right here will automatically create all of these actions for us, or all of these paths for us. Going back into our text editor, open up index.html.erb, and this is where that button is. So if we take a look at our application in the browser, this is where this button is. Let's make this dynamic so that it actually points to a path and goes somewhere. So what we'll want to do is do a link to submit your scary story. And what path do we want to point this to? Let's go into our rake routes again, and we want to create a new story. So this is the path that we're going to use. Just copy paste that and append underscore path to it. btn primary. Do a refresh here and you'll see that nothing's really changed, but this button, when we click on it, it takes us to a different page and it tells us that we don't have a new action in our stories controller. We'll just have to go into our stories controller, create a new action here, do refresh, and there now it's telling us that we are missing a template, and that's expected. So if we go into our apps, views, stories folder, do a right click, new file, and name it new.html.erb. And you'll want to make sure that you're naming all of these files exactly as I'm naming them, because Rails has a very conventional way of figuring out which actions belong to what HTML files. Going back into the browser, do a refresh, and there we have it. We have an empty page here because we don't have anything in this file, but it takes us to the new page essentially. And this is where we can add in our form. So I'm going to add some markup here. Container class, and let's give it column medium of 8, column offset 2, so that we can position this more towards the center. Div class form area, and let's do an HT create a story. Let's just see what this looks like. Create a story. Fantastic. Create another div, And actually, before we do that, we need to create a form. So what form, how do we create a new form? Before we create a form, go back into our stories controller, and we'll need to define what our instance variable is going to be, or what are we going to reference here. So let me just type it in here. Story equals story.new. And so this is essentially saying create a new instance of this story model, or just basically create a story record. So here we'll say form for @story do f, and I'm going to end that right here. And this is essentially just going to create our form for us. And we'll add, let's add a div in here, class form group. And so we're going to say f label, and what do we want to show as this form? Taking a look at our schema, you see that we have our stories right here, and the only thing that they'll really need to enter is this body column. So we'll say body, and we'll just name it something. Tell us your scary story. So that's just the label. Now we need to create the actual input field here. So it's going to be a text area. And let's give it a class of form control. And end it. And we actually need to add, I'm debating, here, we'll do it this way. f.submit class of btn primary. So we need to have the submit button right here for us. Go into our browser, do a refresh, and you'll see that here we have it. We have a form, just a simple one input field for users to type in the body of a story and tell us their scary story, and then submit it by clicking on the create story button here. So let's see what we can do. And actually, I'd like this body right here to be a little bit bigger. And I know you can just click and drag it and resize it however you want, but initially I'd like this to be bigger. So this text area here, we can say rows, and let's just say 10 rows for now. Do a refresh. There you go. It made the text body bigger. So if we say testing my very first story, create a story, it's going to tell us that we don't have a create action. So we'll do that in the next lesson. We'll start off from here, but essentially what I wanted to do in this lesson was to show you how to create, or how to get to this form and how to create it. So in the next lesson, we'll actually make this functional, so when you create, or when you click on create story button here, it'll go through and actually create a record in the database.